Argentinians get ready to take to the streets in rejection of economic shock measures as the new ultra-liberal government vows to repress and detain any protest actions in the public space. Palestinian resistance movement Hamas confirmed that a delegation headed by the head of the political committee, Ismail Haniyeh, is in Cairo, the capital of Egypt, for ceasefire talks. And the French National Assembly approved a restrictive immigration law unleashing a political crisis in the government of President Emmanuel Macron. Hello, welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos. I'm from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Wednesday, hundreds of Argentines will gather in a historic mobilization against the government of Javier Milei. In this sense, the main union organizations warned that they have turned to the International Labor Organization in the face of the application of measures that violate human rights. The General Confederation of Labor, the Central Union of Workers of Argentina, and the Central Autonomous Workers Union warned of the complex and desperate socio-economic scenario posed by the libertarian government, which began ruling on December the 10th. For this reason, they requested the intervention of the International Labor Organization before the application of the public order protocol presented by Minister of Public Security Patricia Bullrich and ratified they will defend their rights in the streets. China canceled a $6.5 billion in aid to Argentina after Javier Milei came to power. Less than 2 weeks after the arrival of Javier Milei as president of Argentina, the government of China put a stop to an exchange for billions of dollars that it had been offering the country to assist with the payment of the debt owed to the IMF. This decision by Beijing to block the agreement comes after Milei's campaign in which he stated that he would break off relations with the Asian country, which he called a communist dictatorship. This agreement projected a total of $11.5 billion agreed during the previous government of Alberto Fernández. The president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, received executives of the Spanish energy multinational Repsol to reaffirm the strengthening and exchange of hydrocarbons. The meeting held at the Miraflores Palace represents progress in the cooperation and high-level commercial exchange between the Venezuelan state-owned oil company PDVSA and the Spanish energy multinational Repsol. The relations between both oil companies are based on trust and legal security to guarantee sustainable development as well as shared profits. This Monday, the oil companies subscribed a series of agreements that will allow improving the execution of oil and gas activities with the joint administration of the company Petroquirique and 7 annexes that integrate the company that operates in the states of Monagas, Zulia, and Trujillo. In El Salvador, around 74,000 alleged gang members were arrested under the emergency regime imposed by President Nayib Bukele. In this regard, the majority of the detainees are being held in high-security prisons, such as the Terrorism Confinement Center. In addition to the National Police reported the confiscation of more than 3,000 firearms during the operation. In this context, social movements condemned the measures imposed by the executive, qualifying them as human rights violations while demanding the release of their families as soon as possible. In Panama, members of the political party Alianza Pueblo Unido por la Vida assured that they will hold marches until the orderly closure of the mining company is achieved. Educators and trade unionists are forecasted to meet this Tuesday at 4 p.m. local time in Porras Park to then head to the presidency of the Republic. With this type of demonstration, citizens hope that the operations for the first quantum minerals and the persecution and prosecution of leaders who fight against mining will cease. For its part, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry stated that Panama is initiating the process for the definite closure of the Panama copper mine, a fact that comes after the formal notification of the ruling of unconstitutionality of Law 406. In Cuba, His Excellency Mr. Darwish Ahmed Al-Shabani, president of the Green Zone Foundation, participated in the central activity of the World Arabic Language Day. During his visit to Havana, Ahmed Al-Shabani signed an agreement to expand the Arab-Spanish exchange project and promote the learning of Arabic language.
We have decided to go for the language, Arabic language, in the land of Latin mainland, in the Caribbean. And we picked Cuba. We could say that we picked it as a start. But this start is important. You need to find the right soil to go on, embed the seed. And there is no better land to go and put the seed in order to grow this particular project. Cuba has got culture, has got history, a civilized place. Cuba is under pressure. Cuban are quality. Cuban people are friendly. People of Cuba has already proven to me in this week that I've been in Cuba that they are the starting point. That's why we picked Havana. That's why we said we start Havana. And that's why we feel that from Havana we will go out of the city into the Caribbean Sea countries and Latin America. So wish us all the best, because we would like and we would love to move from here into the rest of the countries.
In the United States, Texas governor signed a law giving the police the power to detain immigrants and local judges the authority to remove them, the most drastic attempt at immigration enforcement since 2010. In the United States, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed State Law SB 4 that authorizes local officials and law enforcement to detain and arrest undocumented migrants on charge of illegal entry. Civil rights organizations and figures in President Joe Biden's administration, meanwhile, have called the rule unconstitutional. The Texas government is known for maintaining a local anti-immigrant policy with which it expelled more than 65,000 migrants. In this context, the president of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, will challenge the anti-immigrant law enacted by the government of Texas. The Mexican president pointed out that with the measure, the governor Abbott is usurping functions that have to do with foreign policy and that are exclusively the responsibility of the Congress and the government of the United States. President López Obrador also denounced that the anti-immigrant measure is a clever attempt by the governor to gain sympathy to become a candidate for the vice presidency of the Republican Party. The new law signed by Greg Abbott, which would go into effect in March 2024, allows any Texas police officer to detain people under suspicion of having entered the country without documents. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. Palestinian resistance movement Hamas confirmed that a delegation headed by the head of the political committee, Ismail Haniyeh, is already in Cairo, the capital of Egypt, for ceasefire talks. This visit is estimated to follow a meeting between Iran and Qatar on Tuesday and is likely to lay the groundwork for talks on a new humanitarian truce and the release of Israeli hostages and Palestinian hostages. Egypt has confirmed that a first meeting on Wednesday between the Palestinian delegation and its intelligence chief, General Abbas Kamel. This meeting is aimed at reviewing obstacles and conditions for requesting the new pause. New negotiations are underway to reach a new ceasefire between the two sides, but it is still uncertain what will happen. Meanwhile, Palestinians continue to die as a result of the ongoing Israeli bombardment, which intensifies every day. For more details, our correspondent in Gaza, Noor Harazin, reports directly from the ground.
This morning, a very significant thing is happening actually after the surprising visit from the Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh, who was based in Qatar, to Egypt to meet with the chief of the Egyptian intelligence, Abbas Kamel, in order to negotiate and discuss a new truce maybe or a ceasefire. No one really knows for now. However, Hamas's position was clear. Over the past weeks, they talked about they want a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire. They are not willing to accept any temporary few days truce. Israel, from its side, informed Qatar that they are willing for a 7 days truce in exchange of 40 hostages. No one actually knows what is happening now behind the closed doors, and we're waiting on the upcoming hours to see actually what will be happening. Talking about the latest on the ground, let's today talk about northern Gaza. Northern Gaza has turned into a mass grave for Palestinians. Those who do not get killed by the bombings and the strikes will be killed out of starvation. There is no food there, there is no access to water, there is no electricity, there is no even network, so people cannot even check on each other. Adding to this, the fact that there is now 0 hospitals operating in northern Gaza. The last 2 hospitals standing were the Al Ahli Hospital, which is now closed due to the Israeli attacks, and the Ashifa Hospital, which is now operating as a shelter and as a camp for displaced Palestinians. Noor Harazin, TeleSUR, Gaza.
Meanwhile, in Palestine, while most of the members of the states of the United Nations are trying to reach a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, the Zionist army intensified its aggression against the population of the Strip. On the 75th day of the Israeli genocidal operation, the health authorities in the Palestinian enclave confirmed 19,650 dead, 70% of them women and children, and the number of wounded is close to 53,000. In turn, the authorities in Gaza warned that these numbers could increase considerably in the coming hours, considering that the occupation has bombed the center, south, and north of the Strip in the last hours. And the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, expressed his willingness to negotiate a second humanitarian pause with the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas in exchange for a second release of hostages. The Israeli president referred to this possibility by highlighting the alleged humanitarian efforts of Israel since October 7th for the entry of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. The ruler said that several reactions had been generated, among them from the United Nations, in rejection to the Israeli air attacks that prevent the arrival of safe aid to the Gaza people. The Israeli head of state reiterated the pronouncement of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who refused to open the Kerem Shalom border crossing and for the entry of humanitarian aid. In the United States, protests continue in support of the Palestinian people in the face of Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip. In New York, hundreds of people mobilized on the streets under the slogan "From Gaza to Yemen, revolutionary until our victory," in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Groups of demonstrators carried Palestinian flags to demand a ceasefire in Gaza. Likewise, several Arab, Islamic, and Western countries denounced Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people. Russian President Vladimir Putin assured that his country is the sole guarantor of the sovereignty and integrity of Ukraine. The head of state made the statements during his speech at an enlarged meeting of the board of directors of the nation's defense ministry. The Russian leader emphasized that the West saw that it was possible to achieve its goals by legal means, since Russia was working with the Southeast, so it decided to stage a coup d'etat. The president pointed out that after the separation from the Soviet Union, it was only Moscow that defended the integrity of the Ukrainian territory. However, he stressed that if they did not receive Russian help, he would respect the decision of Kiev. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday inspected modern weapons at an exhibition in Moscow and awarded medals to soldiers taking part in the special military operation in Ukraine. Russian Defense Chief Sergei Shoigu and Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov guided Putin through the display at a defense ministry showcasing the state-of-art weapons of the Russian army, including drones armed with explosives and various rifles and military vehicles. Putin also awarded soldiers with golden medals, praising their courage. He said that he knew of their attitude and the attitude of all the soldiers and commanders, and therefore was confident that they would achieve their goals securely to protect their people, the sovereignty and security of the homeland. We have come to a second short break, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. The French National Assembly, with the vote of the extreme right, has approved a restrictive immigration law, unleashing a political crisis in the government of President Emmanuel Macron. With 268 votes of the ruling party, the Conservatives, and the extreme right against 186 votes of the left coalition, the law limiting the regularization of undocumented immigrants and extending the waiting period for legal immigrants from 6 months to 5 years, among other very negative aspects, were fixed. After the result, Aurelius Rousseau, Minister of the Health, resigned. The fissures left by the parliamentary process in Macronism forced the French president to call an emergency meeting at the Élysée, which did not alleviate the situation. And Iraqis voted on Monday the first provincial council elections held in a decade, which were expected to strengthen the dominance of pro-Iranian Shiite Muslim groups. The vote comes at a time of widespread political apathy and disillusionment in the oil-rich country of 43 million that is still recovering from years of war and plagued by corruption. State media reported that polls closed as planned at 6 p.m. local time, with the Election Commission saying the preliminary results were expected 24 hours later. Until polls closed, AFP journalists observed low attendance at 3 polling stations in Baghdad and the southern city of Nasiriyah, where voters arrived one by one. Severe flooding has hit northwestern Australia as the result of the passage of Cyclone Jasper. Australian Emergency Management Minister Murray Watt reported that at least 150 people were deployed on Monday to assist with emergency relief and evacuations in several towns that were cut off in the far northeast of the country. The government sent emergency helicopters to evacuate residents of the towns between the indigenous community of Wuhal Wuhal and the town of Port Douglas, north of the city of Cairns, which are the areas most affected by the flooding. Also on Tuesday, Argentina's meteorological service issued a red alert for extreme heat and a yellow alert for storms in some localities of the country. Authorities informed that a heat wave of up to 32 degrees is expected in the localities of Jujuy and Misiones, while the localities of Corrientes, Formosa, Chaco, and Neuquén will be affected by rains, thunderstorms, and possible hail. The nation's meteorological service recommended citizens to stay hydrated, avoid physical activities, and not expose themselves to sunlight. Violent fighting in Khartoum, Sudan's capital, over the past 72 hours has caused more than 300,000 people to flee the country. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, almost all the refugees in the Wad Madani camp south of the capital have left the area. Violent clashes between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces have unleashed terror. According to the International Organization for Migration, these people have set out on foot as there is no fuel for any means of transport. The Sudan director of the Norwegian Refugee Council, William Carter, warns that they have very little to survive on. And in Thailand, the cave where football players and their coach were trapped will be partially reopened for tourists. The cave was the scene of an episode that shocked the world in 2018 when the teenager of the Wild Boar football team and their coach were trapped for more than 2 weeks, triggering an almost impossible rescue operation carried out by divers, sailors, and hundreds of volunteers. In this sense, more than 5 years later, the cave was reopened to the public, consolidating it as a tourist site. Guided tours have a maximum of 10 people per group, and only 2 groups per day are allowed to enter. During the 3-hour tour, a local guide explains the operation to visitors while they can observe the tools used in the rescue.
Tourists can witness with their own eyes the area from which the boys and their coach were rescued. Although Chamber 3 of the cave is only 800 meters from the entrance, it takes about an hour to cover a distance of a guided group tour. During the rescue mission, which involved about 300 to 400 people, it took about an hour to get the boys from Chamber 3 to the entrance. It would be an incredible experience for tourists.
Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But before saying goodbye, we want to thank our Caribbean audience, especially the audience of Trinidad and Tobago. We are pleased to share our newscast and contribute to provide an alternative news source of the latest world events. You can find these and many other stories at our website at telesurenglish.net, and also join us on social media: Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.